Welcome to SLU, the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. Today, the alumni of 2021 will be awarded, and she will also give a lecture. My name is Anna Lerman, and I will be your host today, and also your voice when you get to ask a question during the Q&A session later on. Actually, you can start sending in your questions already now. Just go to menti.com and enter the code 2075 5221, or just scan the QR code with your cell phone. And feel free to write in Swedish or English. I'll do my best to translate. With no further ado, I would like to welcome Professor Corrine Holmgren, Deputy Vice Chancellor at SLU. Please, Corrine.
Thank you, Anna. Dear students, colleagues, alumni, ladies and gentlemen, warmly welcome to this ceremony. SLU is a world-class international university where research, education, and environmental monitoring are centered around biological resources on land and in water, and how we can use them in a sustainable manner from local to global perspectives. Our work covers urban and rural development, as well as quality of life and well-being of humans and animals. We focus on the very foundations of our existence: clean water, living landscapes, sustainable food production, high standards of animal welfare, sustainable cities, sustainable fuels and materials. We bring together people who have different perspectives, but one and the same goal: to create the best conditions on Earth for people, plants, and animals, for current generations and for the generations to come. Through this focus on the interaction between humans, animals, and ecosystems, and the responsible use of our natural resources, we contribute to societal development and good living conditions on our planet. Graduated from SLU play a crucial role in enable use of our green and blue natural resources from a Swedish and a global perspective. 17th of UN's 17th and Indivisible Goals for Sustainable Development, Agenda 2030. Our alumni are extremely important for the successful development of our university. They are one of our best ambassadors and serve as role models for our students. Through our alumni network, we want our former students to stay in contact with SLU and in various ways contribute to a successful development of their alma mater. Every year, SLU presents an award to a former student who has contributed to creating conditions for a sustainable development of our planet. SLU Alumnus of the Year is awarded to a former student who is an inspirational role model for the field. A jury consisting of SLU representatives as well as former alumnus of the year selects the winner from the nominee. Received her Master of Science in Veterinary Sciences from SLU in 2005, and in 2009 she was awarded a doctorate at SLU. Today, Tove is a professor of molecular epidemiology and deputy head of department at the Department of Medical Sciences at Uppsala University. She is also a member of the Swedish Young Academy. She receives this award not least for her contribution to research on the COVID-19. Let me read the jury's justification. During the corona pandemic, Tove Fall has appeared in media as highly competent and trustworthy representative for her subject field, molecular epidemiology. Her wise words and ability to share knowledge in an easily understandable way have been important assets in Sweden's fights against COVID-19. Her competence and media appearances benefit SLU as they are clear evidence that an SLU education contributes to the public debate in a positive way to improved health in both humans and animals. Tove, we thank you, and please come up on stage and receive the award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Grattis.
Thank you. Congratulations, Tove.
Thank you.
Now you can go and prepare for your presentation. And meanwhile, I would like to take the opportunity to remind you that you can already now send in questions to Tove, either about her as a person or her research or whatever your wonders is. So please, Tove, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and I would like to start by saying that I'm extremely honored and thankful to SLU for this award. I spent more than 10 years of my formative years here at SLU, and now I will tell you a little bit about my how my career has been all the way from SLU and onwards. So this photo shows the little Tove. Here I am, 10 years old, visiting my maternal grandmother in St. Petersburg in 1989. And I wanted to have this photo taken because you can see there's a statue of a horse in the background. And as a child, I really loved animals a lot, so they were a big part of my life. I also enjoyed going to school, having especially mathematics. I also like computers, but most of all, I really spent my time with different animals, especially at the riding school. So when going to choose after my secondary school to choose the right university, I felt that the veterinary program would be right for me. And I remember when I decided to become a veterinarian, I didn't have the information on how to become a veterinarian. So I went to my parents' bookshelves to look in the National Encyclopedia about how to become a veterinarian. But that one hadn't reached the letter V yet, so I had to go to the old one, Bra Böckers Lexikon, which I'm sure many people remember. And I looked at the veterinary program, and I found out to become a veterinarian in Sweden, you had to come to SLU in Uppsala. And I was happy because I didn't have to make the choice between different cities, and I also felt secure because it was close to my hometown. So I truly enjoyed the veterinary program here at SLU. And first of all, I of course made friends for life, but I also had very inspiring teachers who were always close to the latest scientific findings. So we found that we had teachers that could inspire us to learn more and to also be excellent in what we did. One of the parts that I enjoyed most during my veterinary program was to participate in an exchange program to go to France and to learn more about how veterinary medicine was conducted there. I also had the opportunity to visit South America in 2 volunteer programs. One in Guatemala, which is seen in the picture to the left here, where I dewormed a little puppy in Guatemala. And I also went on an infectious epidemiology project in Bolivia, which was, I still carry those experiences with me. But one part that was very rewarding during my veterinary program was a master thesis that I wrote on the topic of hyperthyroidism in cats. And you can see in the middle picture a cat with this disease. And the work that I did together with my supervisors, Bernt Jonas and Bitten Andrén, actually led to a revised policy around the treatment of these cats. So that made me understand that what I can do by doing research properly can actually affect how we treat the animals and make a difference. So after my PhD, after my graduation from the veterinary program, I went on to work as a small animal veterinarian south of Stockholm. But after just a few months, a professor from SLU made me a call and asked me if I would be interested in doing a PhD here in Uppsala. So I accepted, or I applied for the position and finally got selected and accepted it. And the topic of my PhD was on diabetes in dogs. And the main findings from my thesis was that Swedish and Norwegian elk hounds, they have a high risk for diabetes, and that the type of diabetes is very specific. It only affects female dogs of these breeds, and only during progesterone influence. And you can see one of these female dogs that contributed to my research, and her name was Katla. And when I did my PhD here, I really had a lot of good skills that I acquired, or I got a lot of skills. So firstly, doing a PhD on SLU didn't, at least for me, it wasn't a top-down approach. I worked together with my colleagues and my supervisors, and my voice was important. So I really learned good leadership from this. I also, together with the veterinary program, achieved a lot of general skills, and I also understood that collaboration is key in research. And that still applies, of course. And I also try to now use the same supervision model as my supervisors did, to listen and trust the PhD student and tell her that she is the expert in this field. After the PhD, I wanted to learn even more in observation epidemiology. And I realized that I needed to move on and learn also from other mentors. So I joined 2 professors at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Nancy Pedersen and Erik Ingesson, in their research for 2 years. And that time was very important for me because those professors are leading scientists, and they taught me on how to present my findings and how to do high quality research and get it communicated out to the rest of the world. I followed one of these professors to Uppsala when he was recruited for a position here. And I'm still at Uppsala University. And now I have my own research team. This picture is a few years old. So the group is now 16 members of different competences. Some are medical doctors, 2 of us are veterinarians, some are statisticians, bioinformaticians, and nurses. So this means that we have to work cross-disciplinary. We have to understand and leverage from all of the competences that are in the group. And whenever we lack different competences, we'll reach for collaboration with the other people. I must say that during all this time that I have spent as a scientist, family life has also been very important. And that's very important, I think, to acknowledge that here in Sweden we have excellent opportunities to both have a rich family life. My husband, that you can see in the lower picture, is also a professor here at SLU now. And our 2 kids, these are quite old pictures. The older girl here, she's actually gonna represent Uppland in the ice hockey tournament very soon. So, but we have, you don't have to choose. You can have both a career and a rich family life, but you have to support each other also there. So my current research, is it about? Well, the main focus have been all the way since 2010 to look at causes and consequences of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And since the pandemic came to Sweden, I've also used all these skills that I acquired looking at non-infectious disease. I can also apply them on the epidemiology of COVID-19. So the tools that we use in my research team are to leverage on the different registries that we have here in Sweden. And we have not only registers for tax purposes, we also have registries on health and medication and education and so on. And since we use the personal identity number in Sweden for all administrative purposes, we can follow people, of course, in an anonymized way, but we can follow people across life. And by doing that, studying the links to disease. And not only do we have registries of humans, we also have registries of certain animals. So in Sweden since 2001, it has been mandatory to register your dog if you're a dog owner. So what we have done, which has been groundbreaking in its field, is to link registers of dog ownership to health registers of the owner to study the impact of dog ownership on human health. And we have shown that there is a link, especially in people that live in single household, to associated with better health and a longer lifespan in those that own a dog. We have also, using the same methodology, shown that children that grow up with dogs in their household have a lower risk of asthma when they reach school age, even when accounting for parental allergies and asthma. We also combine these registers with data from large population-based cohorts and biobanks. So these biobanks and cohorts, they are collections of data and biosamples from large population-based samples. One example that I will tell you a little bit more about soon is the SCAPIS cohort, which is a newly established cohort in Sweden with 30,000 people contributing and participating in the study. So by analyzing the biological samples of these participants and linking them to registries, we can also try to get closer to disease mechanisms. So we also, as I mentioned, have a close bound to statistics. So we have in our group senior statisticians that advise us and also analyze the data, because it's very important when you have these large databases to analyze them in the right way. I usually give as an example that if you would compare any questions or any biological samples between people that have diabetes and do not have diabetes, they would differ in many, many ways. But that is not, it doesn't have to be causal relations. It could be due to common factors, something called confounders, that affect both the risk of having diabetes and the biomarkers. So it's important to know how to analyze these data. And one of the areas that I'm expert in is something called causal inference. And that is trying to map causality from observational data. So we need to understand the causes and consequences of disease to be able to have a proper treatment and prevention. As I will show you with some of the COVID data sets, we also nowadays require skills in bioinformatics. So we have a huge amount of data in medicine today. So we need to really understand how this data can be handled in order to have a proper data set that then can undergo statistical analysis. As an example, we often use data from the UK Biobank, where there are more than 70 million genetic variations measured in more than 500,000 participants. If we want to understand which genetic variants are linked to disease, we need to be able to handle that data set. Now I will tell you a little bit about one of the main projects we work on in my team right now. It's called the Gutsy Project and is supported by the European Research Council. So the Gutsy Project is a project within the SCAPIS cohort that I mentioned. So SCAPIS is a fantastic cohort. It's 30,000 participants that underwent a lot of different investigations. And one of the investigations was to do a contrast-enhanced coronary tomography. That means that we have very nice pictures of all the coronary vessels of all these 30,000 participants, which is unique. And we want to study atherosclerosis, which is the major underlying pathology of myocardial infarction. And in this project, we want to understand the role of the gut microbiome in the atherosclerosis pathology. So what we are doing is that in a subset of all these 30,000 participants, we have selected the Malmö and the Uppsala site. That is 10,000 participants, where we have used a new technique to map all the different bacterial species in the gut microbiome of all these participants. And this new technique is based on DNA sequencing. So by looking at the genetic code that we find in stool samples from all these participants, we can find out which bacteria lives there. We are then running analysis to see what bacteria are more common in those that have a lot of plaque in their coronary vessels. We also want to find new biomarkers for these gut bacteria. Maybe we will be able to take a blood sample to see what gut bacteria you have. And the third module, which we haven't embarked on yet, is to use host genetics to try to understand whether these bacteria are actually causal or not. And we do that with a method called Mendelian randomization, which in brief is a method where you use genetic instruments. So we look for genetic variants in the human that will increase the level of certain bacteria. And we then check whether people that have these genetic variants are at a greater risk for atherosclerosis and myocardial infarction. It's a privilege for me to be able to work on this data and also to have a very competent team around me. So apart from working on the SCAPIS and Gutsy project, we also have a project where we want to contribute with Swedish registers to understand how a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes affects parental health and their career. So type 1 diabetes in a child is a quite demanding diagnosis for the whole family. And we think that by combining all the wealth of the Swedish registers, we will be able to better understand the impact of chronic disease in the child on the whole family's career and health. From the Gutsy project, I've listed that we're soon trying to publish papers on the microbial drivers of atherosclerosis and their metabolomic biomarkers. So those are small compounds in the blood that reflects what's happening in the gut. So now I will tell you a little bit more about the work we do on COVID-19. As I told you, when the pandemic came, I really felt that I have a lot of capacity, me and my team, to contribute to COVID-19 research, because we have the skills to work on large registry and large databases and to quickly adapt to a new situation. And when the pandemic came to Sweden, there was a lot of uncertainty on how many people were infected. And this is very important for policy and also very important for healthcare to understand what is happening. And without knowing what is happening, we can't really understand also if the different restrictions or other efforts to curb the spread are effective. So we wanted to contribute to disease surveillance. And at this time, during the spring 2020, there was very little testing going on in the community. So I tried to think about how could I contribute to disease surveillance. And I was starting to think about influenza surveillance, which could actually be done by looking at Google searches for influenza symptoms, or looking at how many calls 1177, that's the nurses hotline, where you can call if you need health advice in Sweden. And then I was realizing, but in this time when everyone uses their smartphone all the time, maybe we should have like an app where people could register the symptoms. And by doing that, we might be able to actually understand something about the disease spread of COVID-19. I Googled this, and I wasn't the first one who got this idea. There was already a study that was launched in the UK, which was called the COVID Symptom Study, and by a former diabetes researcher. So I reached out to Professor Tim Spector and asked him whether we could import this app to Sweden. And he said that it was actually already underway by my colleague in Malmö, which I've also collaborated with in diabetes research. And I called then my colleague, Professor Paul Franks in Malmö, and they said, of course, we could work together on this. So that was kind of how we started a project in only, I think this was within 24 hours of me getting the idea. We had, of course, needed all kinds of permissions to do this from the ethical board, but we launched it within a month of having this conversation. So we launched it in the end of April 2020. And this is the COVID Symptom Study Sweden. It's among the largest cohorts in Sweden of data collection. It's more than 208,000 participants today. That we have some loyal participants, that around 40,000 that contribute every week with registering their symptoms, their tests, their vaccinations, and so on. And this is an amazing database for us to work on. And it's actually in times where there is no or very little testing, we see that this app data is a good marker of the disease prevalence in Sweden. And then I was contacted by scientists at Region Uppsala who had seen this effort in 2020. And a year ago, it was expected that last year would have a lot of cluster outbreaks, and that we wouldn't have this big community spread. So they were thinking, maybe together with Tove and her team, we could do something in Region Uppsala to monitor the disease spread and to have information that we can pass on for having targeted efforts in cluster outbreaks. So this was the start of a project called Crush COVID, which is an interdisciplinary project here in Uppsala. And this is from our dashboard where we do weekly updates, publishing a lot of different data. Because we understand now that not only can we monitor symptoms and monitor tests to understand the disease spread, we can also monitor the virus in sewage data. And here we collaborate with Anna Czekeli here at SLU, who is measuring virus from the different municipalities across the region. We also monitor how many people call 1177, how many that needs ambulance for suspected COVID-19, and a lot of different surveillance tools. And this has been extremely valuable. And one of the main findings from our data is that unfortunately, socioeconomically deprived areas, they don't participate in the community testing to a large extent. And by not only looking at the testing data, we might miss large outbreaks. And these are also areas that now have a lower vaccination coverage. So we think that we need this multi-layered approach with many different surveillance tools to be able to capture outbreaks. And we also investigate now how the region's targeted efforts, which are quite unique, where they have mobile test stations and targeted communication strategies, if it has been efficient or not. We also do a lot of research on the contact tracing that's ongoing here in Region Uppsala. So on our dashboard, you can follow week by week where people that are participating in the contact tracing. So that is if you have a confirmed case of COVID, you will be contacted and you have to report where you think you got infected and so on. So that data is collected in an anonymized database, and we report the summary statistics on our data, on our dashboard. So in conclusion from the COVID research, this is an area where we need to collaborate. And it's not only me who come with the epidemiological competence, but we also need people like Anna who can analyze virus in sewage water. We need others like my colleagues, Ylva and Therese, who are experts in communication in difficult groups, difficult to reach groups. So we need to collaborate across borders, and we hope that this collaboration project that we have been now doing for more than a year between Region Uppsala, Uppsala University, and also scientists at SLU, can serve as a role model for the future, because many health problems are not just tackled by medical doctors. We need to have good data, and we need to follow up on targeted interventions and so on. I also want to mention that I really think it's important to be able to inspire young people to do a scientific career, because for me, it's like the best job that you can have. And I'm doing this together with my friends in the Swedish Young Academy. And one part of this is that we have written a book for children aged 9 to 12 years old. It's called Forskardrömmar. And it is portraying 60 Swedish scientists that come from all over the world. And we are telling the stories of their childhood and why they became scientists. So I can really recommend you to maybe borrow this book at the library and hand it out to someone that you think would be interested in maybe becoming a scientist. Because we need scientists and we need university teachers from all parts of society. And I'm also participating in a lot of talks and meeting younger students and going to their schools and so on. And that's extremely inspiring for me also as a scientist to understand what are the big questions and to see how I can inspire them to come to the universities. So saying that, I just want to say again that I'm extremely thankful to SLU, and not only for this award, but also for providing me with an education that has given me a very broad ground to stand on. And I think that here at SLU, all the students, they have the chance to meet scientists and to get the top-notch education that would prepare them if they would like to become scientists later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tove. Now, dear audience, those of you who haven't sent in question yet, please do so. And I know some of you have. Thank you very much. Keep them coming. It's menti.com, and you can use either your QR code or the code 2075 5221. Welcome to the table.
Thank you. It's nice to sit down.
Where to begin? The biggest question first, why do you think that you have become such a successful researcher?
I don't know. I mean, it's partly luck, I would say, but it's also a lot of hard work. And also, I think I have a set of personality features that are kind of good to have. So people usually find me friendly, so that's really nice. And as I said, in science now, you need to collaborate. But I also think that one of the most important characteristics that I have is what in English called grit. So it's not giving up. And it's hard to say, but being a scientist is a lot about disappointments and how to tackle them. So it's being optimistic and being able to handle disappointments in a good way, because you get them all the time. Yeah. The manuscripts get rejected, the experiments fail, you don't get your grants, but you have to kind of rise up as a bird phoenix and on it again next time and hang in there.
So is it a strong belief in yourself and your ability, or is it just that you are so curious that you continue?
No, but I think it's actually both, and then that I allow myself to get disappointed, but then I don't allow myself to be disappointed more than a day or two. Yeah. Then it's like getting up there again, and I know we have so many important things to do, so we can't just, stay in that feeling.
Yeah, because looking at your career, it seems to be a pretty straight line, but But have you ever like doubted that you
Yeah,
choose
so
the right
in
path?
no, I don't think so. I mean, I haven't, since I started my PhD, I haven't considered kind of leaving the research path.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, you can work with research in many ways. You don't have to be in university. So many of my colleagues go on to companies or governmental agencies and do research there. But there was at one point, because in Sweden it's very good to get a big national grant. So that would come from Vetenskapsrådet or Formas or Forte, and having a junior grant from them is kind of like an approval stamp. And I tried, I think, 4 times. And I got...
So that's 4 years?
Yes,
then.
4 years. Yeah. And I think it's maybe 2 months writing process every time. So I spent a lot of my time on my grants. And I got, good grades, but unfortunately I wasn't prioritized.
No, because it's how many percent is it that get?
It's around 20% often, yeah.
No.
And I felt like if I want to continue at the university, I need this, because I had people supporting me, but I knew that they couldn't do that forever. So I kind of need this grant. And then I was getting, there's like a threshold when you're not a junior scientist anymore. So it was in my last year. And I felt, I have to get it now. So then I started thinking, like, what are my weak spots? And I started scrutinizing this, like, this is very good research questions, it's feasible, but I maybe not present it in a good way. And I had just shown the applications to my closest colleague who are in the field. But then I attended a workshop with the junior faculty at Uppsala University, and I got a fantastic mentor, Lena Kjellén, and she read my application and she didn't understand it.
Okay.
And then we worked on it. And it was not because of her, of course, being stupid. It was just me not being able to convey what I wanted to say. And then I sent that application to 3 different agencies, and I got funding from all 3 of them. So then I realized that, okay, if you have a weak spot, everyone has weak spots, I have a lot, but I can take help from people that can help me.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a success factor as well.
Yeah, bringing in help when
Exactly.
needed. We have another question here. You are working with a few big research projects. Well, I think it's not that few, but what do they have in common, and how can they benefit from each other?
I think that what they have in common is that we usually try to work on what we call big data. So it's the numbers are huge. And we also really try to get the best measurements possible. So if we're going to measure proteins in blood, I don't want the second best method. I want to be able to use the state-of-the-art method. So we're trying to get good data as good as possible and in big numbers. And I think just like the technical skills to handle those big data sets and not being afraid of it is one of the strengths of our group. And now we're also trying to learn how to best present the results. And those are also kind of skills that are in general for all the projects, irrespective of the question.
How have you, because then I imagine that you had to pull in the resources like the researchers and postdocs from that has those skills. And I guess now when you have, it's quite a large group, you have 16 people in your group. But when you started, like to be able to attract those with that special competence.
But I think first I try to learn myself.
Yeah.
So I'm quite good at coding and statistics now.
Yeah.
So, and then I try to recruit people and also to collaborate with others. So, but we want everyone in the team to have quite a high level in handling these big data. But of course, with the Gutsy Project, I could recruit 2 postdocs. And in the ad, I was really kind of telling in the ad that if you come to Sweden, you will be able to work on this data. And both my postdocs, Kun and Sergi, they're fantastic, and they have told me that they came for the data, not for me. So, so that's also one way, like telling people that if you come here, you will be able to work on this high quality data.
Because it's quite unique to have
Yes,
that kind
yes,
of data?
exactly. The microbiota data, since those methods have not been in place for this high throughput research, is quite early.
Yeah.
So it's one of the biggest cohorts in the world having that data.
Yeah. When you hear people talk about genomics and metabolomics, like looking at the genes and the
Small compounds
molecules produced in the cell, right? It almost sounds like with that data you can get the answer to anything but what's the limitations there?
Yeah, I mean, our health is like an interplay between the environment and the biology of our body. So, of course, this is extremely useful, but it's also the outer factors, you have to account for them. And like I can study the effects of exercise, for example, and I can see that the more physical activity you do, in general, less risk you get of cardiovascular disease. But I need to collaborate with people that understand how to get people to, promote physical activity. Because even if I can say, oh, this is very healthy for you, how to do the interventions to get people to have a healthier lifestyle, that's a very tricky question. So we still need to collaborate. How to build the cities, to promote physical activity. That I'm not an expert in that, but many people at SLU are. So
and I think most people sort of know what you should do to be healthy, but
exactly.
Don't do
So
it really.
my samples can show you why, but not how. Maybe in that perspective.
Traveling back in time, do you remember your first impression when you came to SLU? Were you were set on being a veterinarian?
Yes.
Yeah. But your first impression first?
No, it was great. I was just here at Utbildningshuset and they called our names, and it was fun because there were some fake students in the class.
Oh,
yes,
interesting.
Yes, that was from year 3. But it was really such an amazing feeling, and I think that people get disregard for which program you choose, that you are among people that are interested in the same things. Suddenly, everyone was into animals, right? While being riding school girl where I grew up was not a status symbol, You should play handball or football there. Okay. So suddenly you were among others that were interested in the same thing. And then you didn't have any boring subjects, you only had exciting subjects. So that was also amazing. And I lived here at Hjällbo. So that was great. A lot of, dogs and cats around and a lot of nice people.
I remember when someone asked me during my student years that, are you gonna do a PhD? And I was like, what? No. But for you, it seems like you had an aim. Or you remember when you felt that that would be something for me?
So my parents, they have a PhD, both of them, but in humanities. So when I was a child, I thought that seems quite boring because I couldn't see all the exciting stuff going on inside their heads, right? So I had decided I want to do something with my kind of hands, practical. I want to contribute, to society as a clinician then and help dogs and cats that are sick to get healthy again. But then, of course, it was rather fun to do the master thesis, about these cats. So that was nice. And then when I got the call, you should, apply for this position, I was thinking, well, I can try it, So it was, during my veterinary program, actually, I was not looking for a PhD. I was going to be a clinician. But I think for my personality, so I'm a bit kind of obsessed with details, and then it's good to be a scientist because nothing should be wrong. But if you have, 10, 15 minutes to have a consultant with an animal owner, pet owner, and the animal, and you're going to do all the examination and everything in 15 minutes, you can't go into those details as much. So then you have to be more pragmatic. So I think for my personality, it's very good to be a scientist.
But still, you have been up to the challenge in communicating those details to a broader public. And now during the COVID, what do you think what is the biggest challenge in communicating scientific progress in real time as it has been during this pandemic?
No, but I think the general problem is to communicate what is science, like what's the scientific process that, you know, we're going from being very unsure, having different hypotheses, and then we learn some, we have some data pointing to one direction, and then a week later now with the COVID, everything goes so quickly, we might have a little bit other data, and it's natural that we, you know, change our mind during the way. And at some point we have so much data, so we're kind of convinced that this is a fact. But during that process, it may seem like scientists disagree a lot, right? Because they disagree on how to interpret this weak data. And people get very nervous about that, because if one professor says X and the other one Y, this is very strange. So I think that we should also start with kids, but also in general to explain the scientific progress.
Yeah.
And at some point we see that this is a fact, but there's a long way between the initial hypothesis.
That the argumentation part is also part of the scientific process.
Yes.
That
and another thing I think is I would like to say with the COVID-19 that we should say what's the risk evaluation and what are the risks, for example, in the pandemic with doing an intervention or not doing. So that's where I think the scientists can contribute. But the other side of it is how to handle with this risk, like risk management, and that's much more political. So of course, if we here can say it's a big risk of opening the nightclubs, it's a political decision to say, should we do it or not, right? Because there are pros and cons with doing it. So, and that's also been mixed up. So often I get questions like, are you worried? What should we do? Well, I kind of want to stay on this side saying, you know, if we do this and that, there are some studies, you know, saying this and this. What we should do is like on the politicians, and the experts are somewhere in the middle.
We actually have a question here on that relates to this. Have people suffered from more hypochondria during the pandemic, do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure if there's an unknown virus, that's usually adds on to those kind of worries.
Yeah.
With the mental health in general, I think it's kind of mixed message. You know, suicides have dropped, but the hotlines for mental health problem have been overwhelmed. So I think we will learn more the coming years from what actually happened. And my hypothesis is that we might have one group that benefits, you know, from being able to work from home, less stress and so on. And we have other groups that are much more vulnerable.
Yeah. Let's see if we have another one here. Is it like you expected to be a researcher?
Yeah, I usually kind of live in the present and not think of so much about the future. I would
think
say
this might be a key to why you are successful. Yeah.
But I think that I often had warnings. People can say, oh, it was the worst decision of my life to do a PhD. It was awful. You know, in academia, people are really nasty. So in that perspective, I'm positively surprised. But I mean, everyone has their own experience, but I've been around the right people, I think. So I had a good experience so far.
Or you maybe have this like water on a goose.
A mentality.
That if someone is not well behaved, it doesn't become you. Maybe I try to tell them, and then I maybe keep out a bit. I've been see if I can manage here. I've been one of those persons who have been using the COVID symptom study app. Yeah, and
thank you.
Now I can see it's 4,700,000.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a lot.
The biggest part is in the UK. Of course, they have a bigger population. It's also been supported by the government in a strong way there. So it's we learned so much from this data that we couldn't imagine when we started it.
Yeah.
Like when we started it, we didn't know about long COVID, that it existed, right? But in this data set, we have then millions of people reporting the symptoms every day, and we can see, okay, those that test positive, women in this age, you know, how long time do they have symptoms? Are there any risk factors? If we look at men, it's an amazing database, so we can ask many, many questions, and it's been valuable.
And I noticed also that it has been, the app has developed
During the time.
Yeah, that, well, it also reflects how different symptoms, because the symptom lists have become longer and longer.
So that's interesting. So what we did was that we, you know, you were asked, like, do you have a headache today? Do you have fever? And then there's one field saying, do you have any other symptoms? And then you can write in free text. And we have mined that free text and compared between those that say, I tested positive yesterday and those that have tested negative. And we could find that heart palpitations, so when you feel your heart is beating fast, it's an uncommon symptom, but it was super much more common in those with COVID than not. And then we moved it up as a question. So it's super adaptive compared to how we worked in the past. So we can adapt it to the situation.
Yeah.
And when the vaccinations came, nobody knew in 2020 early,
No.
you know, what kind of vaccines we will have. But when it came, we can just add that on.
Yeah. Maybe this type of apps will be used for more
I hope so.
diseases as well. We got a question here that might be a struggle for you that live in the moment. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I hope I'm still at the university as a professor.
Yeah.
And I think so. But you never know in life. Things can show up. But I have an amazing team right now. So hopefully all my students, they do all the work and I can just sit there and be wise.
But will the group, will it be like 10 times bigger?
No,
or
I hope not.
No.
There are research that the optimal group size is 7 or 8, actually.
Oh, so you already exceeded that one. Yeah.
With a factor 2.
Yeah.
So I think then the key is that you have other people that take over responsibility, because it's a little bit too much to actually be able to be in every person's, you know, and help them and support them. So I think the key, if we want to expand, then it should be other people going up as group leaders.
So I'll see you in 10 years then, and we can see what happens.
happens.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. Let's get the right note here. Thank you very much. And thank you, Corrine, for the motivation and handing out the prize. And thank you to all of you that have been with us this afternoon and that have sent in questions. In 2 weeks, on the 29th of September, and 2 weeks after that, 3 other alumni will give lunch lectures online. So keep an eye on slu.se/alumni for more information. We are more than 39,000 people that have graduated from SLU. Are you maybe one of us? Then join the alumni network. You will receive information about SLU. You will get invitations to alumni events and a great chance to keep and maintain and expand your professional network. By staying connected, we can make better use of each and one of us knowledge and experience. And that will help us to reach even better solution for a sustainable world. Thank you so much for your attention and have a nice afternoon.